Hello, everyone. Welcome to this new webinar. We're here with attorney Cynthia Mulian, and we're going to talk about the best practices for USCIS interviews. They could be adjustment, naturalization, and I-751. So, Cynthia, she is a senior associate attorney at Powers Law Group. She has been licensed since 2018, and she handles a wide range of family-based immigration cases. And she began her legal career here at Powers Law Group in 2018. So, Cynthia, the word is yours.
Thank you so much, Maria. So we're going to talk a little bit about what the best practices are for you to prepare for your interview. In this day and age, you are going to likely get scheduled for an interview for almost everything that you file with USCIS, that is United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. So I'm just going to move this here for right now. Okay, so what do we do first, right? Before we file anything, we want to make sure that you first and foremost qualify for this form of relief that you're seeking. Then you want to make sure that if you are going to file, if you are in need of any sort of waiver in addition to the underlying benefit that you are seeking. So for example, if you're applying for residency and there's something that you have misstated in the past that could be viewed as fraud, then you want to maybe try to have that fraud waiver prepared in advance so that whenever they do make that finding at your interview, you're able to quickly get it filed and receipted and get the process going as soon as possible. Okay. So it's likely that you will get these interviews. There's no such thing as a waiver for an interview in this day and age. So you need to know that if you file something, especially here in the Houston area, you're going to get scheduled for an interview and you're going to get scheduled very quickly. So whenever we have individuals or clients that hire us for interview prep and attendance, usually the first thing that we do is we talk about all the logistical information. Where do they need to show up? How soon should they get there? Even from what type of shoes to wear, because you're going to have to go through metal detectors and you want to give yourself enough time so that you can timely check in, go through everything that needs to get done before you get called into the back for your interview. So all of those things are very minor things, but things that you want to take advantage of and know ahead of time so that it's one less thing you have to worry about on the day of your interview. Another thing is that USCIS is requiring that everyone that does not speak English must take an interpreter with them. So you want to make sure that you have all of that arranged in advance so that you take the proper documentation for whoever's going to be serving as your interpreter. The next step is when you go to your interview, you want to make sure that you have all of your documents organized. So if you go for an application for residency or to remove conditions or for citizenship, whatever it may be, you have to show all of your original documents so that an officer can inspect and confirm their validity, even if they were filed with the original application. So you are going to have to take, for example, an original marriage certificate, birth certificate, divorce decree, passport, ID, all of that. So you want to make sure that you have all of that organized in a way that when the officer asks for it, you can easily present it. So for example, also if you are going to do an adjustment of status based on marriage to a US citizen, you want to have all of your documents to prove bona fides or to prove a legitimate relationship nicely organized so that if the officer asks you, okay, what documents do you have to show me that you filed taxes, you have your taxes ready to go. If you have bills, you have that ready to go. If you have pictures, you have it all ready to go. And you have copies that you can leave for the officer to include in your file. So this is all part of the document organization. Then you want to understand what the interview purpose is, right? So for example, a lot of these times is to verify that you are who you say you are, your identity, verify that you are eligible, that you are admissible, and that there is nothing that makes you ineligible for the relief that you are pursuing, okay? So also, if you're going, again, to the example, if you're going based on a petition from a family member, a spouse, then you need to understand that the purpose for this interview, a portion of it is to establish that the marriage is valid, that it's valid for immigration purposes. So you want to make sure that you are prepared, that you go in there understanding that the interview is so you can establish that. And the officers are trained so that they can, read your body language, read how you react to certain questions, how you react to whenever they ask for certain documents to establish whether or not is a legitimate or a genuine marriage or not. Okay. Now for citizenship, it's a little bit different. Obviously, if you're applying under the 3-year rule based on a marriage to a US citizen, then there is still a component where you have to establish that that relationship is still valid. But for citizenship, most of the time, it's mostly to establish your eligibility, that you, if you don't qualify for an exemption, to do it in an English, in Spanish or your native language, then you have to go in there to show the officer that you do know your civics questions, that you know how to read and how to write in English as well. So it's very important to focus your preparation based on what is the purpose of the interview. So what can you expect on the day of the interview? So when you go to the interview, usually once you've gone in, the officer is gonna, before they do anything, they will swear you and they will swear the interpreter in. After that, they'll have everyone introduce themselves. And most of the times the officers will take all of the identity documents of everyone and then start on the questions based on the form of relief being pursued or sought at the office, okay? So at these interviews, it's very important that the individual is eloquent, that they answer the questions correctly. Remember, you're under oath, you don't want to lie. And if you don't understand a question, you can always ask the officer to repeat it for you so that you avoid guessing. So what are things that you can expect if you go to an interview, an adjustment interview, or an interview for residency based on a marriage to a US citizen? So a lot of the very common questions that we've seen recently are, for example, how did you meet? Right? That's very important. How did you both meet? When did you meet? When did you get married? Right? Where do you live? If you have any children from any previous marriages or previous relationships, do they know them? Where are they living? Who is financially taking care of them? They may ask questions like, when did you find out about their immigration status? And you have to make sure, you want to make sure that all of your questions and answers, align with what you've put in the application, and that you and your spouse know the answers and that they're correct. Because if for any reason they were to separate y'all and do something that's called a Stokes interview, you want your answers to be aligned and you want them to be consistent. At the firm, it is our common practice not to give a list of questions because we don't want you to memorize things so that when you go to the interview, it seems rehearsed and not genuine. But we do give you just kind of like a general idea of what questions you can expect at these interviews. And so as I was saying, the Stokes, the marriage fraud interviews, right? Then the officer can separate you two and ask you questions in depth to make sure that your answers align, and ask about, household routines, the daily behavior, who takes the charge on finances, things like personal habits and all of that. So it's very important. You don't want to get stressed. You don't want to get, think that this is going to happen to you, but you do want to be prepared before you attend one of these interviews for anything, any possible scenario. And the same thing with with I-751 or the petition to remove the conditions. If you get scheduled for one of these, you want to make sure that you are prepared with your spouse to continue to answer questions about the legitimacy of your marriage. So after you got married, after you got your green card approved, how has the situation changed, or how are y'all still living together? How do you conduct your lives now, and so on and so forth. All right, documents that you could take, you may not want to include a lot of the information. You don't want to include a lot of the same information that you have already included for the original petition, right? The original I-130 and I-485, but you want to include documentation from the moment that green card, that conditional card was approved until that interview date. What updated evidence do you have of a joint life together? So taxes that were filed, if you bought a house together, if you've had children, their birth certificates, all of that are documents that you want to bring with you. And like I talked to you a little bit about the naturalization interview, there's an English exam, there's a civics exam that's a part of it. And so what happens is that if you go into the naturalization interview and you don't qualify for a specific exemption, then you're going to have to study a bank of 100 questions. From those 100, the officer will pull 10 questions, and from those 10 questions, you must get 6 correct. Once you have those 6 correct, the officer will move on to the English exam, the writing portion of it, and just the confirming that you are able to understand English so that they can approve you for your citizenship exam. And the officers will usually have you go through all the security questions to confirm that you understand your answers that you've provided. The interpreter and representative use. So an interpreter, like I said, it depends if you qualify for an exemption for the citizenship, but for adjustment purposes, you will need to take your own interpreter if you don't understand the English language. They must take their oath. They must take an oath. They must present an ID, and then they have to translate things verbatim when they go to their interview. A representative and attorney can assist with you, but we're there basically to ensure that everything is being done properly, but we can't necessarily answer questions on your behalf. That's your responsibility to prove up the benefit for which you are seeking. But if, for example, an officer is out of line in some questioning, or if the officer has forgotten a specific document that's instrumental to the relief that you're seeking, then we're there to provide that, or to have interpret if forever they're misinterpreting something. All right, so very important that whenever you do attend these interviews, that you answer with honesty and consistency, right? If you've entered the US on a tourist visa and later overstayed, got married to a US citizen, and applied for residency, you want to make sure that everything is consistent from the moment that you applied for that tourist visa abroad, that all of your answers are the same. Because if for any reason you answer something differently that maybe what you said in the past, all of that can come to light, and there could be an inconsistency, and there could be a fraud finding that can really be detrimental to the relief that you may be seeking. So be very honest about everything, such as address changes, employment, marital status, and all that. Okay, after the interview, if the officer has recommended approval, then you will be either getting your green card for an adjustment application, or if it's for a citizenship interview, you're going to get scheduled for an oath ceremony. But all of this is usually sent to you after via mail. Now, if the officer is not satisfied with the testimony that you've given at your interview, the officer can issue something that's called a request for evidence, maybe asking for more evidence to prove up the legitimacy of the marriage, or they can issue something that's called a notice of intent to deny, and you'll have possible time so you can respond. Now, if it takes too long after the interview, let's say about 90 days after the interview, you still haven't received a response, and there's certain methods, that you can take and strategies for you to reach out to USCIS to try to get a response from them on that benefit that you've sought. So how do you avoid delays and requests for evidence? Well, make sure that when you file the initial application, that you file it as complete as possible. And then when you go to your interview, use that opportunity to take more evidence to prove that benefit that you're seeking, right? So if you have a criminal record and that record has been, that conviction doesn't make you ineligible, but you didn't have the original documents or those certified documents in the initial filing, make sure that you take that with you to your interview, so that you don't have to prolong it by having to get the officer to issue a request for evidence, and that could take another 30 to 60 days and just causes more delays. So take everything with you. Try to file something great as soon, in the initial filing. If you can't, then make sure that you take all of that with you to your interview, so you can avoid a request for evidence or potential notice of intent to deny. All right, so the best practices is, if you have an attorney or if you don't have one, as soon as you get an interview appointment notice, reach out to your attorney or talk to an attorney to see how you can prepare. What documents can you have in place? How can you prepare with the questions that you can expect and all that, so that you have enough time before your actual interview date. And I'll pass it over to Maria now.
Thank you, Cynthia. So, we're at the end of our webinar. Thank you so much for being here with us. You can follow us on our social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, also on Blue Sky, and you can scan the QR code on the screen, and that way you can sign up for our newsletter that we send every 2 weeks with important information and news about immigration. Also, you can find us on our webpage at www.rubypowerslaw.com or call our number.
I'll clarify the number. It's 713-589-2085. Just to make sure you call the right number.
So for our August webinars, well, we're going to be seeing a little bit about navigating the perm labor certification process, also about family immigration and new opportunities and pathways, humanitarian options in 2025. That could be asylum, TPS, and parole explained. Also, the winning strategies in immigration court, bond motions, and appeals. So we hope to see you soon, and thank you very much for being here with us.